Patterson, as usual, very kindly stepped up to help. So thank you, David. So David's lecture, and I think this is a very important notion that I know David came up with. Anti-Semitism as being morally required. And we should let that sink in for a minute, because I think this is a very important concept that David, I think unique contribution to scholarship, to understanding contemporary anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism morally required in the wake of 10/7 from Hitler to Hamas. It's a hard word to hear. Wow. Professor Patterson is on the faculty of ISGAP and also a professor of Holocaust Studies. He was the head of the Ackerman Center at the University of Texas at Dallas, and has been writing on the lies, as Bob Dylan would say, dealing with the lies of anti-Semitism, but also maybe more profoundly about Jewish wisdom. He was a student of some great rabbis, worked with Elie Wiesel, so he's also well steeped in Jewish thought and wisdom and philosophy. And now he's going to present his analysis of the world of lies. So
Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon. Long day. Hang in there. My title here, or at least Anti-Semitism Morally Required in the Wake of 10/7, is the title of a book that I just sent to press with Academic Studies Press for their ISGAP book series. So it'll be, with God's help, coming out in that series. And so the research behind the presentation is, taken from that research. It's a book. The presentation is much shorter. So there are a lot of things that could be elaborated on that I won't have time to elaborate. Secondly, for today, my audience consists of teachers, students, and other aspiring scholars, us. Because I think for this subject matter, we are particularly implicated. And my next slide is a little disturbing, but I won't keep it up long. You saw similar images yesterday. What are we dealing with? One thing briefly point out, this is a child's bedroom, covered in blood. This scene is repeated over and over and over in Nahal Oz, Kfar Aza, Magen, Beri, Sufa, Nir Oz, Netiv Hasara, Alumim, Yachini, and of course the music festival. This slaughter took place on a Shabbat, as you know. Less widely known is that it was a Simchat Torah, and even less widely known that it was Shemini Atzeret. Sometimes I call it, I'm not the first, sometimes I refer to it as the Simchat Torah massacre. I have caught in a little flack for that. Why do you call it Simchat Torah massacre? I said, well, it took place, yes, but that's too Jewish. I get accused of too Jewish from time to time. But it is significant, at least to me. And if you wonder, well, did Hamas know about Simchat Torah? Sinwar bragged about what an expert he was on Judaica, Jewish learning, after studying it for 22 years in prison. So what is Shabbat? There's a long discourse unto itself, meaning of Shabbat. Shabbat is one of the names of God, for example. Simchat Torah is the culmination of a Zman Simchatenu, of the season of our rejoicing, Sukkot. If you've been to Israel during Sukkot, you know there's nothing like it. The nations will come in the time of the Messiah and celebrate Sukkot with the Jews. There's an astounding parade of Christians down King George Street from maybe 100 different countries during Sukkot. It's something to see. So it's a time of ultimate joy. Joy in Torah, rejoicing in the Torah that makes the Jewish people the Jewish people. There are no Jewish people without Torah, and there's no Torah without the Jewish people. Get rid of the Jews, you get rid of Torah. So we rejoice in what sanctifies not just Jewish life, but human life. It's also Shemini Atzer, which is the 8th day of gathering together. Sukkot is a season during the time of the temple when sacrifices were brought for the sake of the nations. Abraham was blessed for the sake of all the nations. Sacrifices were brought for the sake of all the nations all through Sukkot during the 7 days. The 8th day, as the Midrash describes it, the king, after having a party with everybody in his kingdom, sends them home, the guests, and he's left with his family, the Jews, whom he gathers unto himself. If you want to find the king in the closest proximity to the Jews, it's this day. So this is a celebration. So Sukkot is also, Simchat Torah in particular, is also associated with children. Children are compared to Torah scrolls in the Jewish tradition. Children were first targets for Nazis. They're designated targets here as well for, I'm not going to describe ways in which infants were not just killed, if only they had only been killed in front of their parents. The Zohar says that children are the face of the Shekhinah, the divine presence in this world. The Talmud teaches us that all of creation is sustained by the breath of little children, not by the strength of the mighty Atlas, the shoulders holding up heaven and earth, by holiness. The breath of a child is what sustains creation. It's what imparts meaning to creation. So, what does this tell us about anti-Zionism? What are the anti-Zionists anti? When they shout death to the Zionists, death, what does that mean? Death to what? This is one understanding, one Jewish understanding of what Zion means. That when we say this in synagogue, every time we take the Torah scrolls out, right? Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. For the Torah goes forth from Zion. There's a close association between Torah and Zion in Jewish tradition. And I'll comment on that a little more. But this is how this assault is celebrated in Gaza by the civilians of Gaza, the innocent civilians. Okay? When the kidnappers took the hostages into Gaza, in Gaza City, they had to protect the hostages from the crowd. Celebration at Harvard. This is not just a protest. It's a celebration. It's a celebration of what? of what? What are they celebrating? What are they supporting? You saw in the film yesterday, one of the protesters saying, we are Hamas, we are Hamas. We don't just support Hamas, we are Hamas. But what are you if you are Hamas? What are you pro when you're pro-Hamas? And of course, this spills into the streets, as we saw in the film, from the campus into the streets. The campus is where anti-Semitism begins, historically. Back to the church fathers, the intellectual, the intelligentsia, the most highly educated and most intelligent minds of where this is where anti-Semitism, the seeds of anti-Semitism are planted and flourish and spread. The intellectuals legitimize it. And it spreads into the streets. What begins as a philosopher scratching his head, 2 generations is a way of life. Okay? This is true. I'm sure you all know that, for example, 8 of the 13 ministers at the Wannsee Conference had doctorate degrees. All 4 of the Einsatzgruppen commanders at one point or another had doctorate degrees. And this is where, not only where anti-Semitism originates, but it's where anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism is legitimated. If these great minds see Zion as the embodiment of evil, there must be something to that. So it goes into the streets, into society. Next thing you know, down the street, you have this equation of Zion with terrorism. Here, Zionism and terrorism, the premise is not that all Jews are evil, no. The premise is that all evil is Jewish. Therefore, if Zionism is terrorism, what is the moral requirement when dealing with a Zionist entity? If Israel is an apartheid state, what are we morally obligated to do with Israel? Has to be dismantled, doesn't it? Such evil cannot be tolerated. But what does it mean? How are we to understand the emergence of anti-Zionism as the most fashionable and I would say morally required form of anti-Semitism? What is the anti-Zionist anti exactly? I suggested, Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah. It's the Torah that goes forth from Zion. Andre Neher, I think, has an important insight here. And it inspired me for the next book I just started working on is called Zion, the Meta of Jewish History and the Meaning of Anti-Zionism. We'll see where it goes. I don't know yet. But Neher says Zion, which is only a fragment of Jerusalem and the land of Israel, is a word one can neither play around with, nor play tricks with, nor beat around the bush with. It is the key word of the meta of Jewish history. Through Zion, Zionism becomes bidimensional. The vertical is interlocked with the horizontal. It's the dimension of meaning. It's the dimension of holiness and sanctification. If you know Levinas, it's the dimension of height and the Most High. In Jewish history, Zion has an ancient history. The word appears more than 600 times in the Tanakh. Okay. Just the word Zion, never mind Jerusalem and references to the land. So this dimension of height is what I would argue is what is under assault. This meta of Jewish history, which has implications for human history, for human understanding. I've mentioned dimension of height. Here we have the guardians of higher learning. Those of you, next time you're in a faculty meeting, as I ask your colleagues, as I have done myself, what makes higher learning higher anyway? Of course, they look at me like I'm insane. Like, what a stupid question. But it's a question concerning the whole endeavor as not as thinkers, as students, as teachers, educators, the institution of education itself. Anti-Semitism and how we deal with it, how we understand it, has a bearing on how we understand learning. Witnessing, remembering, everything that makes the meta that makes everything else matter. Because you know this one. I mean, we saw these figures yesterday: Liz McGill, Sally Kornbluth, and you know that story. It depends on the context. Calling for the extermination of the Jews, by implication, river to the sea. Well, it has its context. Really? Perhaps some of you are not as familiar with Professor Sima Shaksari. She's a professor at University of Minnesota, Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies. She's a specialist on rape counseling. Amy, you may know who this is. I don't know.
And Professor Shaksari does not identify as a she. This is another example. Professor Shaksari identifies as non-binary. Just so you won't.
Well, yeah,
Just so you know.
that's fine with me. What's not so fine with me is she's denies, well, there's no real evidence of rape on October 7th, and to suggest that the Palestinians or Hamas would rape people is racist. It's racist to make the accusation.
This professor identifies as a rape crisis counselor.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, that's right.
God help anyone who should need her counseling.
I think
So-
that would help.
God forbid. But you see this in this, we've spoken about inversion, Holocaust inversion, inversion of good and evil. Amy did a beautiful talk about that yesterday, to suggest that Palestinians perpetrated acts of rape is racist. So, we've heard a lot about Hamas since October 7th. In the news, in social media, the name gets used a lot. But my guess is not many people know who they are and where they come from. So, who are they? What are you pro if you're pro-Hamas? Hamas identifies itself as Muslim Brotherhood in its charter. Hassan al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood in March 1928. He was influenced by Salafists. Rashid Rida, for example, was one. Abdul al-Maududi, political Islamic thinker in India. So in 1928, in Egypt, he founded the Brotherhood. And this is the creed. They're like 7 guys, who are now like 7 million or more. Allah is our goal. The Prophet is our leader. The Quran is our law. Jihad is our way. By jihad, he means killing in the way of Allah, al-fiq Allah, and death in the service of Allah, while we are inflicting death on the infidel, starting with the Jews, is our highest desire. Albana was a big admirer of Hitler. And Albana indicated that one important thing he learned from Hitler was the power and the importance of propaganda, which Hitler talked about a fair amount, including in Mein Kampf. I don't know if you've had the stomach to actually read Mein Kampf, but there he talks about propaganda at some length, and he explains that the purpose of propaganda, certainly not to inform anybody, and he says it's not even to persuade exactly. The purpose is to incite, and incite what he calls zorniges Hasse, wrathful hatred. By 1935, the Brotherhood had their own propaganda division. And of course, in the 30s, Germany was the capital of propaganda. High-tech, sophisticated, Dr. Goebbels, right? Dr. Goebbels. So Germany, the most highly educated people, perhaps, in the world, Germans. Most universities are modeled after German university models. So the Brotherhood is learning propaganda. The Brotherhood, by that year, 35, was sending delegations to the Nuremberg rallies in Germany. Haj Amin al-Husseini, whom I'll talk about more briefly and shortly, made a shidduch, introduced the Brotherhood to Nazis. Al-Husseini paid his first visit to the German consul, Heinrich Wolf, in Jerusalem in March 1933. So there's a tight connection between al-Husseini and the Nazis. Meanwhile, 1938, the Brotherhood hosted what they called a parliamentary conference for Muslim nations, and where they handed out copies of Mein Kampf, Arabic language, or actually it's portions of Mein Kampf in Arabic. By that, in 38, there was not a complete Arabic translation, but significant chunks of Mein Kampf, and the Arabic language edition of Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which first came out in 1926. So this is what is informing the thinking, the ideology of jihadism a la Muslim Brotherhood. Al-Husseini is really a key link between Hitler and Hamas, so to say. Al-Husseini was on the Nazi payroll as early as 1937. The Nazis helped to finance the Arab Revolt of 36, 37. He had to flee Palestine once again because the British were about to arrest him for inciting those riots. He ended up in Iraq, where in April 1941, he was instrumental in overthrowing the British-backed government of Iraq. And they maintained control, the jihadist rebels, until the end of May, when the British regained control. But before he left on June 1st, al-Husseini incited what's known as the Farhud, in which about 600 or so, depends on the source, Baghdadi Jews were murdered. This is a Jewish community that goes back to the Babylonian exile. Okay. And then he left town. This is 1941. Now keep in mind what else is happening. What else is going on as of June 22nd, 1941, is the killing operation is set into motion. The Einsatzgruppen go to the east, following the Wehrmacht with the invasion of Soviet territories. This movement to the east in Europe is parallel with this movement to the east in the Middle East. In any case, al-Husseini had his first meeting with Hitler that year on November 28th. In the meeting, he's discussing with Hitler the extermination of the Jews of Palestine, using the same scientific methods that Germany had perfected. Germany was perfecting the methods of mass killing with the euthanasia program, which began in October of '39 already. They're planning the extermination of the Jews. Hitler, in 1922, in an interview with Josef Hell, a journalist, said when he comes to power, his prime aim will be to exterminate the Jews. He also added, according to Hermann Rauschning, his friend, that his purpose was to destroy the tyrannical God of the Jews and his life-denying 10 Commandments. It's a war against God. Al-Husseini contributed to this extermination effort, forming several SS killing units consisting entirely of Muslims. The most famous, infamous one was the Hanshar Division. It had more than 22,000 Muslims. Here you see him reviewing the Hanshar Division. Now, I know I'm going fast, but for the sake of time. For these activities, al-Husseini was wanted as a Nazi war criminal. So he was in hiding for a time in France, where a lot of them were hiding. And he turned up in Cairo, June 20th, 1946, and received a hero's welcome by Hassan al-Banna, the Muslim Brotherhood. By then, the Muslim Brotherhood had their own media outlets, their own press, newspapers. He was welcomed back as a great jihadist who joined with Hitler in the jihad against the Jews. They described Hitler as a great jihadist. In the Arabic language edition of Mein Kampf, in the intro, the translator's introduction, which I translated, it's in a book I wrote called A Genealogy of Evil. It's short. In that intro, Hitler is described as a great jihadist. Okay. He also became buddies with Sayyid Qutb. This is probably even more significant for the spread of jihad. Sayyid Qutb is the most influential, I would argue, jihadist ideologue in modern times. His book, Milestones, is like, basic reading. The Ayatollah Khomeini, Ruhollah Khomeini, studied Qutb very closely, translated Qutb into Farsi, studied with the Brotherhood ideologues in the 40s. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a Muslim Brotherhood-based government, modeled after structures of the Brotherhood. If you read Khomeini's Islamic government, you see Qutb in there. Qutb also wrote an influential work called Our Struggle with the Jews, published in 1950, which is, you wouldn't be surprised, he identifies the Jews with Satan once again. It's not that all Jews are evil, but all evil is Jewish. Everything evil comes from the Jews. They are satanized, demonized, and of course, dehumanized. Once they're dehumanized, they are de-victimized. They can't be victims any more than Satan can be a victim. Does anybody feel sorry for Satan? No. So Qutb had a huge influence on Ahmed Yassin, among many, many others. Founded Hamas December 9th, 1987. Hamas Charter, I think somebody said yesterday, now I'm going to have to go read the charter. Here's a little bit. There's no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. It can't be negotiated. It would be to negotiate peace with Satan is apostasy and damnation. Article 15, therefore, ends with this refrain from the Al-Bukhari, the Hadith, I will assault and kill, and I added my own line, and rape and torture and burn and behead and mutilate. If only they had merely killed those people on October 7th. Killing them was not enough. Murder is an inadequate word for this, it seems to me. Now, the charter invokes 3 sources to demonstrate the truth of what they claim and what they propose. The Quran, Holy Scripture, yeah? The Hadith, which is a body of writings, the oral tradition in Islam, teachings from the prophets that weren't recorded in the Quran, from the prophet, and the protocols of the elders of Zion. This is the hagiographic word that legitimizes the thinking here. The Zionists use of the invasion of the world. This is not about Palestine. Hamas is not concerned with Palestine. They use all evil, to achieve its end. They undermine societies, destroy values, goodness, right? They corrupt conscience, deteriorating character, annihilating Islam. Islam, of course, is the source of every decent value, all goodness, all purity. The Jews, Zionism, the Zionist invasion, the Zionism is behind drug trade, alcoholism. There are many other evils here that I've left out. And this is to facilitate its control and expansion. They're, imperialists, colonialists, etc. Now note this: Israel, Judaism, and Jews are the source of evil that challenge Islam, Muslim people. It's not about territory as explained by Muhammad Hussein Yaqub in 2009. If the Jews left Palestine to us, would we start loving them? What do you think? You think they'd start loving Jews? They are enemies not because they occupied Palestine. They would have been enemies even if they did not occupy a thing. Our fighting with the Jews is eternal. The redemption of humanity rests upon the war against the Jews because they are the Satan, they are the evil, until not a single Jew remains on the face of the earth. Every Jew is a carrier of the contagion. The contagion is Judaism. Alfred Rosenberg, Nazi ideologue, says that the Aryan Geist is poisoned not just by Jewish blood, but by Judaism. The ism is in the blood. They can't be converted or redeemed. Every Jew tests Judaism positive. Doesn't matter if you're observant or not. It's irrelevant. Therefore, in October 1943, the Nazis deemed it necessary to go to Tromsø, Norway, 220 plus miles above the Arctic Circle, and kill or arrest, to be killed, the 17 Jews that were there. This is not scapegoating. This is not xenophobia. This is not envy of the Jews, right? If that's all it is, you don't have to go to the Arctic. Because the contagion is in every Jew, and like smallpox, it will spread unless you take care of every case. The extermination has to be total. Now, how did such decent and intelligent intellectuals in the West get in bed with this? I think this, now this is very complicated. Many books have been written about this history. But I think, among other things, it comes with what I call the turn inward, where the self becomes the center of all things, the ground of all things, of law, of truth, of morality. And I think I'm oversimplifying, okay, first thing, but I think it begins, for example, with the sola fide of Luther. We don't need the institution. All we need is our inner faith. Man justified by faith alone. Never mind your deeds. That's not going to get you there. Kant's notion of autonomy and being self-legislating. To be free is to be self-legislating. He called for the euthanasia of Judaism because the Jews have this slave mentality. They follow moral dictates that come from outside of them, that are commanded, not that they generate from their own reason. Of course, you know about Luther and the Jews. Wagner, you know about Wagner and the Jews. It's the inner passion that drives the folk, that that legitimizes. It's where the greatness of the folk lies. Nietzsche's will to power. Now, before you say, well, Nietzsche had no use for the anti-Semites, that's true because they were the crowd. Nietzsche had no use for the crowd. He also had contempt for the Jews, though. Will to power, right? The Jews are the antithesis of the will to power. So what do you have in the history of modernity, which I think in many ways is a process of thinking God out of the picture, and once God's out of the picture, so are the Jews, or they got to get out of the picture. This sculpture gives me chills. Modern man, I never heard of Bobby Carlyle, but modern man is autonomous, self-legislating, resolute, self-creating. The most fundamental teaching in the Torah is in the first line. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. This is antithetical to that teaching that most fundamentally defines Judaism and other traditions that came later. Ideological redemption, utopian thinking. We can't get there through God. We're going to get there through our own ideological, political power structures. The socialists, communists, all these guys, Fourier, Marx, Toussaint, Proudhon, they're all anti-Semites. They all wrote diatribes of various lengths against the Jews. Toussaint said who was an atheist, said the Jews are guilty of deicide. As soon as the ontological landscape is the source of all things, the ontological reality is the only one, the next logical move is to look to nature or natural accidents for the ground of value and legitimation, so that race becomes a first principle. This is with what is happening here, and what is happening as this goes into anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, is the question more and more intensely raised in the modern period: where lies the foundation of the dearness of the human being, the sanctity of the other human being? Where does that lie? What makes the other life matter? Why should I care? You know how Torah understands this, that we all, each human is a child of God. Each human is an emanation, each soul is an emanation of the Holy One. Every soul is connected to every other soul through the source, and every body is tied to every other body through Adam. What is the Hebrew word for human being is Ben Adam, child of Adam. Why does God begin with one and not with two? The sages ask, and they say it's so that nobody can say to their fellow, my side of the family is better than your side. There's only one side. And we have all of the obligations of one family member to another. Particularly with a stranger. We're commanded 36 times, most frequently commandment in the Torah, to love, care for, be kind to the stranger, because the stranger is part of your family. Notice how when race becomes a first, not a sociological phenomenon or cultural fact, but a first principle of determining human sanctity, it decides all of history, as de Gobineau says. And then the Jews become a problem because the Jewish teaching rejects race as a first principle. This is, image and likeness of God, the creation, Michelangelo. Now, as race becomes a first principle, this is from the 19th century, this evolves into ways in which we think about race in the 20th century, from Nazis to now, with all the differences. I'm not saying, critical race theorists are Nazi. Nazis are Nazis. I don't say these bad guys are the same as Nazis. Jihadists are not the same as Nazis. They are their own evil. But with the phenomenon of intersectionality creates the culture of victimhood that Juju talked about this morning brilliantly. Kenneth Levin, professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, says intersectionality is the shared victimhood of groups victimized by white male racism and its history of imperialism, colonialism, exploitation, and slavery. Among the prominent anti-Semitic intersectionality allies in academia are ethnic activists, LGBTQ activists, feminists, and others on the political far left. That's the end of his remark. All victims have a sameness that is shared, as do all perpetrators, and this becomes a matter of power structure. Race is about politics and power in this thinking. And victim, it's a valorization of the victim. The victim is better than the perpetrator. When this thinking starts to pervade humanities and social sciences and academia, it legitimizes other forms of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, such as neo-Nazis, jihadists, and others whose hatred is legitimized by the guardians of higher learning. Just a brief word about critical race theory. I'm sure you've read about this before, where race functions much as the same as class in Marxist theory. The CTR theorists acknowledge the influence of Marx on their thinking. Here's the difference. Marxists want to get rid of, at least in principle, get rid of class distinctions. The critical race theorists want to maintain racial distinctions because it maintains the perpetrator-victim structure. So race is the first principle of value. It's not, again, this is not that's what makes it a theory and not an anthropological study, right? Study of race. It's a category of legal, political power. If you read the critical race theorists, you'll see that they emphasize the importance of narratives. What is your narrative? Get your narrative right. Races are separated by unbridgeable gaps. Some critical race theorists are segregationists. They don't think that races can ever get together. Of course, white privilege is the source of all evil, and all Jews are white. The Jews are the consummate white supremacists. Ibram X. Kendi, who's, I don't know, you've heard of him, yes. How to be an anti-racist. The most threatening racist movement is not the alt-right's unlikely drive for a white ethno-state, but the regular Americans' drive for a race-neutral one. Color blindness is anathema to the critical race theorists, at least to Ibram X. Kendi. The real racist denies the essentialism of race as a first principle. That's the enemy. So Judaism denies it. Judaism is Zionism. Zionism is racism. If you don't support Hamas, you're a racist. This is the 50th anniversary year of the UN Resolution 3379, which was passed on November 10th, 1975. Maybe we'll do something at ISGAP on that occasion, we'll see. But it's a critical anniversary because this premise continues to pervade academia, at least the academia I live in. Zionism is racism. That's why it's morally required to be an anti-Zionist. You cannot be considered a moral person if you support the existence of a Jewish state. I have students who, in their social lives, early on in a new relationship, they'll be asked, are you a Zionist? Because if you are, we can never have anything to do with each other. Zionism is racism. This continues to be a truism in many quarters of academia. Robert Wistridge, even then, declared that the flimsy line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism has been erased here. If not then I would say certainly now. On that occasion, Elie Wiesel responded back then in 1975 to the resolution. This is published in A Jew Today. And I'll read a little bit of that. It's worth reading. Professor Wiesel had his hand on the pulse of the human soul. He says, what's not on the screen, what's on the screen comes after what I'm about to read. He says, this is why the United Nations' infamous resolution comparing Zionism to a form of racism is shocking and revolting. It must be viewed in the context of chilling horror. As always, where the Jewish people is concerned, the problem is more relevant to history than to politics. This is not the first time the enemy has accused us of his own crimes. Our possessions were taken from us and we were called misers. Our children were massacred. We were accused of ritual murder. To weaken us, they tried to make us feel guilty. To condition us, they attempted to distort our self-image. No, the process is not new, he says. We are told that this is not about the Jews, this is about Zionists. This too is hardly new. They try to divide us, to pit us against one another after having pitted us against the world. This could have been written today. Then he ends by saying, whoever attacks Israel is attacking the entire Jewish people. The resolution on Zionism offends us all, faced with the anti-Zionist attacks by those who corrupt language and poison memory. I have no choice but to consider myself a Zionist. To do otherwise would mean accepting the terms of reference used by Israel's enemies. I wish our non-Jewish friends would do the same and claim Zionism as a badge of honor. When Sergeant Roddy Edmond was taken as a prisoner of war in December 1944, Battle of the Bulge, he was in, I think it was Stalag 19. He was with a group of close to 1,000 non-commissioned officers, and he was the ranking officer, Sergeant Major. The commandant of the camp told him, tomorrow morning we're going to line up, and I want you to have every Jew step forward from the line. And so you tell him, you're the ranking officer. So next morning they lined up, the commandant so ordered, okay, every Jew step forward, and they all stepped forward, all of them. That's what we need to see happen, I think. However, we have the phenomenon of the good Jews in academia. And when I've put up these names in the past, people are horrified because many of us know a lot of these people. In summer of 2020, there was this statement signed by more than 400 so-called Jewish scholars in response to what was described as Israel's going to annex the West Bank. Of course, never happened. Abraham Accords came along, it didn't happen. And they could have objected to it, but they used this language describing Israel, condemning Israel as an apartheid state guilty of crimes against humanity. Who most notoriously are the people guilty of crimes against humanity? Nazis. That's what they were charged with. Words matter, as Amy Ellman correctly pointed out. Words matter. This language incites hatred of the Jews. It's the kind of language that you see coming from faculty members. I would recommend you to take a look sometime at the website for the Amcha Initiative. Tammy Russman Benjamin, very good. She does more than study it and research it. She does a lot of work in the state of California, which is a cesspool, by the way. I have my grandchildren live there. These are professional academic organizations that had brought BDS resolutions before the group. They don't always pass, but if they don't pass, it's by a narrow margin. That it would even come up. Like the Association for Asian American Studies is worried about Zionism. Really? At the bottom, you'll see 130 plus gender studies programs. These are not individuals, but programs claiming in their statement that the Palestinian cause is the feminist cause. So you have Students for Justice in Palestine. You know, as Wendy pointed out, from the river to the sea is from the water to the water. Palestine will be Arab. Juden Rein. Palestine, Juden Rein. I shouldn't say that too loud because they'll start chanting it out there. BDS, Omar Barghouti makes the claim that every night Israeli soldiers go hunting in the occupied territories for not just to arrest jihadists, but they go looking to kill children. Blood libel, right? Jews control the American government. Trump is in the pocket of the Jews. World Jewish conspiracy. Social movements. Palestine is our generation. South Africa. What was done with South Africa has got to be done with Israel. The apartheid state. if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project called Israel, we're doomed. Melina Abdullah, another Black Lives Matter, in this case, professor at Cal State. Our oppressors are the same. This is intersectionality. Right? Our liberation must be linked, in a separate quote, Jews invade our campuses, causing Islamophobia, racism, and intolerance. The Jews are the cause of these things. Of course, you know this image from October 7th. I stand with Palestine. This is put out by Black Lives Matter, Chicago. It's another intersection. Nihad Awad, one of the founders of CARE. CARE, of course, we know now is a Muslim Brotherhood front, basically. He said they have to align with Black Lives Matter. This is, shared victimhood. Praised Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who you've heard Charles comment on, saying, the mission of the Brotherhood is to complete what Hitler started. I'll speed it up. So, what's driving the moral requirement here? This is what Shaw Friedlander calls redemptive anti-Semitism, where in the case of the jihadists, your place in paradise rests upon spilling Jewish blood. In the case of the left wing, some of the left wing anti-Zionists, your standing as a moral person, a righteous person, rests upon the elimination or actively pursuing the elimination of the Jewish state. You'll notice that this anti-Zionism almost always reeks of self-righteousness. So redeemed from what? The eternal Jew. Nobody looks like this. The Jew is a metaphysical category here, a mythical figure, the source of all evil. So if Hajj Amin al-Husseini would preach, slaughter the Jews everywhere, their blood pleases Allah. He who kills a Jew is assured a place in the next world. Your ticket to paradise is the blood of the Jew. Hamas, founder, Ahmed Yassin, killing Jews is not an unpleasant necessity, as Himmler described it. It's an act, holy act, pleasing to God. A holy act pleasing to God, an act of devotion. And so these individuals were brutally murdered in an act of devotion to God for the sake of redemption. Hamas prayed as they were butchering and raping and burning and maiming people on October 7th. Allahu Akbar is a prayer. So here, sketching this line of development, you have the murderers. Hitler, his last written words were he enjoined the world to continue the fight against international world Jewry. Those who took up that appeal, Hamas leaders, I'm sure you know these, Sinwar Haniya, Khalid Mashal. Sinwar and Haniya are no longer with us. The enablers. The congressional testimony, the position of these presidents of the best universities in the world is not some innocuous opinion. It's a betrayal of a trust with life and death implications. So, as one professor to another, I want to end this with the scene from Judgment at Nuremberg when it was based on the judge's trial, the Nazi judge's trial. Burt Lancaster plays Ernst Janning, a judge who's on trial. His attorney, played by Maximilian Schell, is badgering a witness, a young woman who refused to testify that this Jewish guy had molested her, She said, it never happened, never happened. The guy was railroaded. And the defense attorney is trying to get her to say, oh yeah, he did molest you. And finally, Yanning stands up and shouts, are we going to do this again? So I'm saying to you, are we going to do this again? Thanks.
So we have about 20 minutes if you want to sit down.
Yeah, I'll sit down.
So wait. So, you ready? Cool. So thank you very
I don't know
much.
if I'm cool, but I'm ready.
Yeah, you're cool. So thank you very much. It's your work in my view is profound, and it really cuts to the philosophical and cultural and even civilizational foundations of anti-Semitism. So very important. But being the nudnik, I'm going to push back a little.
Please.
You quote Elie Wiesel, and the Jewish people are at a time where we need allies. And you want everybody to step up and say, we're also Zionists, to identify with us, to support us, to defend us against, we agree, a genocidal social movement to exterminate us. It's underway. There's a license to kill. And perhaps we're past the tipping point. History will see. And yet, I have to say, and we've had this conversation before, I think if we're going to dismiss critical race theory, we have to engage it. What do you mean by critical race theory? What is the role of racism in Western society and in the United States? What does it mean to the ears of people who are committed to ending the foundational element of racism in the United States and in Western democratic countries and beyond? How do they hear us? What do we mean? What is our role as scholars and people fighting to end one form of hatred? What is our role and our responsibility to address other forms of hatreds? And in a time of increased fragmentation, increased racism, increased xenophobia, increased sexism, the democratic principles and practices of our country is diminishing. It's being attacked by the radical left, the radical right, and political Islam. Basic democratic principles, it begins with the Jews. It doesn't end with the Jews. Other forms of hatred is emerging, re-emerging, being reinforced. So how do we deal with confronting racism, analyzing it, and finding ways to promote it, building bridges, and at the same time being perhaps critical of some of the theoretical foundations that are damaging to us and to other issues?
That's an excellent question on a point that really demands clarity. When race becomes the foundational defining category for determining the meaning, the value, the dearness of a human, that's when it becomes a problem. The reason racism is a problem is that race is not a first principle. Racism is a problem because there are other defining features that sanctify the human life. Martin Luther King taught this, right? All God's children. Just the phrase, all God's children, meaning all of us, undermines at least the thinking of at least some of the critical race theorists I read. Of course, also, when you say critical race theory, you're talking about a lot of different voices. Right, so you can't just, you can't say they all think they, look, when you talk about Jews, you're talking about a lot of different voices. But my concern is that whenever an accident, race, gender, color, class, becomes the foundation for understanding the meaning, the dearness, the holiness of a human, you've got a problem. Holiness does not lie in anything that can be weighed, measured, counted, or observed. There's nothing that meets the face, levinas. To behold the face is not even to notice the color of the eyes. What is revealed to me in the face, according to Levinas, is the holiness and the ethical demand that comes with that, and my connection. The vahavta recha kamocha, you shall love the neighbor as yourself, you shall love the stranger as yourself. Kamocha means that is who you are. Not just in relation to your neighbor, your buddy that you drink beer with and watch football. No, it's the guy that doesn't look like you, doesn't think like you, God forbid, belongs to a different political party. And that commanment's repeated 36 times, most frequently repeated. And it's not the neighbor, the stranger's race. The race is what you have to be blind to if you're going to recognize the holiness. Okay? So I get nervous when there's the insistence on, well, you got to, first you have to know race. I think that can be a problem.
So I'm going to push back again a little bit, and then we'll open it up very briefly. I agree with you, and these are beautiful ideas that I aspire to, I believe in. Right? This is basically central, fundamental to our culture, to our wisdom. Mm-hmm. But what happens when you live in a society that categorizes people, and based on those categorizations, some people benefit and other people don't, economically, politically, culturally, et cetera, for 400 years, and these systems are structured, entrenched. They have a lot of meaning and power in our society that doesn't allow these amazing, incredible ideas of godliness and humanity to exist.
Well, you have to resist it.
Okay.
You have to bear witness against it. You have to do something. You can't stand idly by your brother's blood. We have to be able to answer the questions put to Cain. Where's your brother? And what have you done? Our task in life is to alleviate suffering. These things you describe cause a lot of suffering. I sometimes say to my students, each of us is sent into this world to save one life. Just one life. Try that. So look, I'm not denying the reality of race, these structures, and the suffering it causes, but it has to be in the name of something that transcends that you address it, that makes it a problem. That's what I'm saying.
Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. I'm going to help you out on this so-called critical race theory. It's a false theory. The term race itself is a concoction. There's no anthropological justification for race. There's no genetic, medical confirmation that race even exists. The economics why race was introduced as a category. And I think that we're prior to the transatlantic slave trade, 1400s. Before then, there was no concept of race. So we have to unpack why race even became an alleged first principle. And I thought the Academy, for not challenging this falsehood, the Academy perpetuates it. And so we have work to do. But I believe, I don't get eternally upset about that. It's what we do about it.
What we do about it.
Right. And I think if the oneness of our humanity is the first principle, then we need to write books about it, we need to make movies about it, we need to get rappers to rap about it, we need to do everything that we can to get that truth out and not succumb to the categorization of those who want to keep us separated, want to keep us from the benefit of having the real first principle. So I don't, most people that use the term critical race theory could not define it if their life depended on it. Now,
Yeah.
Kinde, who you had he's a professor now at Howard University, in charge of a whole department. So he's teaching what you had up on the screen. At the flagship Historical Black College University. I'm also a Howard grad. And I understand a little bit more fundamentally why Howard got nervous when I tried to get them to establish a Center for the Study of Antisemitism. You know, then the schools back off, referred to deal with the essential truth. But, you know, Dr. Patterson, I could listen to you all day. And thank you for your scholarship. But I don't want you to be the sole scholar on this. You need allies, scholarly allies, who are willing to join in a public way. Because my greatest fear is that we talk loud in here, but when we leave here, we whisper. We're not even saying anything. So the challenge is what we do when we leave here. To learn from all of what we've learned here. So when we have come back in the Summer Institute for 2026, we can report how we contributed to coming up with solutions that work, coming up with solutions that engage people, intergenerational. I have a lot of hope for young people. I don't think they're as messed up as our generation. At least that's my hope. But young people need to be exposed to proper education, the proper nurturing, and set examples in life that work. So I just want to commend you for your more than your scholarship.
I appreciate that.
I felt in my heart what you were saying. And I think a lot of times academic scholarship becomes so sterile, so empirical, so data-driven, that we lose the humanity, even what we put forth.
Yes. Which is the whole purpose, right?
Yeah, as I totally echo what Dr. Chavis said. I totally agree. And also with your ideas about critical race theory and how damaging it is. But I wanted to add, I guess, another dimension, and I want to see how you respond. And I think that maybe your answer can get us thinking of what we do outside of this room. So I think that you played a role in editing a paper that I published with ISGAP about Heidegger and how his philosophy mirrors the, I guess, critical race theory ideology of our day. And in 1936, I think it was, he wrote a very famous essay called Self-Assertion in the German University, where he described that he would create philosophy, his philosophy, right, as the queen of the sciences. And that meaning that that philosophy would reign and govern the entire university. And he had a new structure for the university that would be militaristic, it would be labor-driven, and I suppose academic, and he would combine all these things with his philosophy. So in this restructuring, right, he created this revolution that created a lot of damage. He ended up, he was a Nazi, he threw out a lot of Jewish professors, and that's very much what we see today. And in the, I guess, self-assertion, those who self-assert in our universities today are, the structure of the university is very flawed. You see the faculty senate infested by pro-BDS and critical race theory proponents, and they are the ones who govern oversight over the curriculum. And where is the other side saying that this is not acceptable? So do you think that after this whole tangent here, my question is, do you think that, how should the institution change? As a professor, what do you see going on inside the structure of the university that led to what happened in Heidegger's Freiburg University?
Yes, thank you, Sabrina. Heidegger's restructuring was a recentering of truth. Heidegger, if you know Being in Time, argues that authenticity lies in inner resolve, Entschlossenheit, right? It's the Nietzschean will to power. Of course, Heidegger wrote a lot about Nietzsche. So it's the resolute self becomes the ground of truth for Heidegger. The resolve, refusing to go along with das Mann, the crowd, which threatens your authenticity. So as soon as the ego becomes the arbiter of truth, then I have my narrative, you have your narrative. Narratives compete. Pretty soon you're not searching for truth. You're searching for power. Okay. So we live in a post-truth era. This way of thinking has found its way into the way many parts of academia are structured. It makes it difficult, for example, for an administration to define professional standards to which professors have to be held. And I'm not talking about publication and teaching loads. I'm talking about, for example, when one of my colleagues says to a class teaching some literature course, I want you guys to go out there right now and join the demonstration. This is a dereliction of duty. It's not academic freedom. You're hired to teach this course on British Lit or whatever. So this ego-centered truth justifies what so-called views of academic freedom that are unjustifiable, that are dereliction of duty. But what's duty? What does duty mean? So it's the philosophical thinking has an impact on the institutional structure, which has an impact on what's happening outside the window on the campus. It's all connected. Now, what do you do about it? How about the profession? Let's hold the faculty, like the faculty senate, determine some professional standards that they have to answer for. Easier said than done. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Hi, thank you so much. What you just said is critical. The faculty senate piece, letting that go, because what you said is critical there. There's been a resistance that I've had, honestly, about the term victimhood. Every time, and what happens for me, but you've interrupted it, but what happens for me is when I hear that, I have heard in the past that African Americans perhaps are whining, complaining, and that they're wanting to wallow around in efforts, extra stuff from the transatlantic slave trade, like it didn't really matter. This is the first time from hearing your presentation today. I think I understand, and I need you to tell me if I'm correct. I think what you're saying is that the victimhood piece is a paradigm used by people to try to advance their evil agenda against other, so in other words, they're like baiting African American stuff, they're latching onto our stuff in order to advance their issues of anti-Semitism and other things, as opposed to you saying, hey, that black stuff, get over it, black people, you whine too much, we're really, really strong Jews, we don't wallow in things. So it's really not here, it's not this as the former, as in you guys are just a bunch of whiny people, get over it, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work hard like us, versus the use of the term victimhood is just a location element to understand the procedure by which people are justifying ways of advancing their own evil stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to justify, if you're a victim, you're righteous, you're good, you're virtuous.
Yeah.
There's no virtue in suffering, right?
Yeah.
There's no, having suffered doesn't make you a good person.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can coexist then, right? The truth of African American past and
Yes.
renouncing victimhood by saying you can't use us in this way. Don't glob on to African American civil rights stuff to advance your own anti-Semitic.
Yes. And the African Americans should say that. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
What are you
at.
doing?
This is great.
You're exploiting us again.
This was
Here
in
you
like
are
the
exploiting
wilderness.
us again.
I get it now. I thought you guys were just saying we're a bunch of whiners.
No.
I get it now. Wow, this was deep. Okay, thank you so much.
But, yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
This is exactly what I was trying to get at. Very
That was good.
important, because when we dismiss critical race theory, we have to define very carefully what we're dismissing.
Yeah.
And then, once it's dismissed or critiqued, what are we going to do to address racism and other forms of hatred and not come off as people who don't care?
Yeah.
Which is it's dangerous, and there are people, their colleagues, not David Patterson, but other people who are not in the room, who critique critical race theory and actually say, it's enough, get over it. Slavery was centuries ago. We know America's great, get on with it. And it's terrible.
But some,
Okay, but we have to, sorry. Go.
Some
Final word for David, and then we have to go.
some strains of critical race theory can become an excuse for not doing anything.
True. Okay. On this note, so a key, I'm grabbing the microphone. Essential element of our work here is to learn, but also a key part is for you guys to create projects. The Wiesel King Fellows have to produce projects for your campus, and for the faculty here to produce course curriculum. And the breakout sessions in the evening are really important for for decompressing, debriefing, discussing the content, but also start thinking about your courses that you have to develop by next Friday. So we're going to have this session in 10 minutes. Your breakout sessions start in 10 minutes. So I'm sorry for cutting this session short. We can listen to David for hours, but the good news is he's coming back.
All week, I'm here all week
But
next
you're
week.
giving a lecture again?
Oh, I'm doing a lecture at Kabod Sunday.
Okay, another?
No,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I can.
Okay, good. Okay, have a nice evening. Thank you, David.
I'll